my dear friends, all the guys, most of them are very familiar to me for a long time, as Madhuji himself mentioned. Our friendship and collegiality dates back to early 1990s. In fact, he was referring to an article that I wrote in 1990, a couple of months ago, and that was when he proposed that it would be interesting to come over here and then deliver this prestigious lecture instituted by the family of Dr. Antony in his memory and carried forward by the department. As all of us understand, the world is becoming quite complex, and then one of the important dimension of our life that is immediately hit by this kind of drastic changes that happen around us is all about memory. Today, this particular lecture is in memory of a person who has contributed so much to this college and also the department. Although he passed away in 1992, his memory, his work, his contribution lingers in the mind of so many people, including his family members and also former colleagues as well as contemporary professors in this department. This is actually quite an interesting, kind of thing that a person who had made a deep imprint in the history of our department, your department, is being remembered constantly. And I'm actually quite impressed that AES was the one who mentioned his name to you. I mean, that itself shows that how important during his time his intellectual kind of contributions were. So in that sense, we are actually remembering a person who has contributed immensely, to the department and its teaching. And also, I told by Prakash and Marsh that he was a great scholar. He had earned his doctorate from Yale and then came back. And very few people actually come back and contribute back to the nation building. I mean, so Dr. E.C. Antony was one such person of immense integrity who decided that he will come back to India, he will come back to Kerala and share his valuable knowledge and experience he gathered from elsewhere and part it with the students in Kerala. So in that sense, I'm deeply honored that I'm invited to deliver a lecture in memory of a person who has made such immense contributions to our society. But I did not have the privilege to interact with him personally. I did not know him personally, but from so many anecdotes and instances of his interventions in this college, I've come to know that the department will further carry forward his memory and will kind of institute such lectures in future also. Today, I thought that it will be interesting to talk about a particular topic that is of very, very contemporary interest. As you know, last month, two important events shook the world. I mean, although it's not about the Gaza, the Palestine-Israel war that I'm talking about. I will have something to say about that also in due course. But this is actually about two important events that took place, one in England, UK, and one in United States of America. So let me first tell about this particular thing that happened in United States. John Biden, the President of the United States, has signed a particular kind of document the other day, which is actually about the safety and security of the use of artificial intelligence in future. That the state will kind of intervene and control the future development of artificial intelligence, particularly considering the safety and privacy of the people. This is the first kind of a comprehensive state intervention to regulate what is called alternative intelligence. I mean, you all know that alternative intelligence has captured our imagination of people, imagination of multinational corporations, imagination of world leaders and many others. But in this particular instance, this is the first time, and this is actually as a follow-up of something that happened a few months before this. A few months before, something very strange happened in the world. The people who are actually at the helm of the technological regime under which we now live came together to issue a statement saying that artificial intelligence, the growth of artificial intelligence, development of artificial intelligence, the future trajectory of artificial intelligence need to be very efficiently controlled by states. And this is not something that happens occasionally. I mean, this is not something that happens, every time. Because capital, as you know, doesn't actually need the interference of the state. They want to, kind of keep the state out of their profit pursuit. So here, Elon Musk and various others who are actually, spearheading this whole process of the development of artificial intelligence in the world, came together to say that there is something nasty about this. There is something, curious about this that we need to, kind of take care of. There is a need for controlling the way in which artificial intelligence is going to, to be promoted across the world. Leading to this particular, I call that actually, the Posthuman moment. Because, all these technological companies and technological leaders have been selling dreams about artificial intelligence so far. And now that artificial intelligence come in a big way, they are afraid of their own child, their own product. I mean, it's just like the Frankenstein scenario, reenacting. I mean, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I mean, the creature is created, and now you don't know what to do with the creature, and the creature takes care of you, the control. And this is precisely the moment. That it has recreated that Frankenstein moment in a much more serious, with much more serious consequences. And then this particular point is called technological singularity. Singularity is not in the sense that it is unique. Singularity in the sense that it's a very highly dense, kind of sets of processes. Whereby from there is actually a going back is impossible. That is irreversible. An irreversible point of technological development where the developed technology will take care of the human rather than humans will control technology any further. This is called technological singularity. I mean, it's a word that one Newman used in 1958, and there is also a book from MIT Press, on technological singularity. So technological singularity is not about any unique technology. Singularity, the word singularity, stands for that particular, stage where technology reaches a high density point. From there, we do not really have a control over what happens later on. The control over what happens in future is not limited to, is not possible anymore by humans, and that is called technological singularity. You might think that, this is an exaggeration to say that we have reached the plateau of technological singularity, but that is not so. I mean, that's what Elon Musk and even others are saying. And the second incident that I want to mention is the technology summit, the artificial intelligence summit that Rishi Sunak organized in UK, London last week. And according to their narrative, it was a huge success. Many tech leaders and even Kamala Harris, like Vice President of the United States, participated from India. I think Rajiv Chandrasekhar participated and many others. So it was a world summit of people who were concerned and getting actively involved in artificial intelligence. And there also the major thrust was how to kind of control the growth of artificial intelligence. Why do you see that this kind of a concern emerging at the international level? On the other hand, technology so far has been considered by this group of people. I mean, not about trade unions, not about others. Ordinary people, trade unions, political parties, civil society participants, major kind of organizations which have some ethical concern about technological progress have all along been skeptical of technological progress. But the citadels of capitalism has never been worried about technological progress. For the first time in capitalism's history, capital itself is getting worried about the way in which technology is contributing to their profit pursuit. And this is actually the drastic difference between the technology that we are familiar hitherto and artificial intelligence as a technological system. So we must need to probe a little further into this conflict of interest that emerges among the leading practitioners of artificial intelligence and why they are worried about this. And this is precisely where our whole discussions on posthumanism becomes very productive and benefiting for us. I'm sure that you have heard the word posthumanism by now. I mean, it's not. I don't consider it as an all too familiar word, and that every student of English literature would have come across that word at some point or the other. But the way in which we understand post-humanism, the post in posthumanism is quite problematic. It is not as simple as the post in postmodernism, for example, or the post in post-industrialism, for example, because there is a way in which we can the post actually represents a kind of confusion. We don't know how to name the thing, so we call it, modernism we understand, something that comes after modernism we don't understand, we can't name it properly, so we call it postmodernism. It's not a name per se in that sense. It is not a name per se. It's a temporary kind of a kind of transient name, but it's stuck there. For example, postmodernism is stuck there, and we call it postmodernism. We have not been able to name it appropriately yet, so it is called postmodernism. But the post stands for something. It's postmodernism. Like post-capitalism, post-industrialism. All these words are there, and we are familiar with, and then we try to understand. We grapple with this post in many of these concepts, and then we tend to understand them. But when it comes to post-human, it's much more complex than all these post-isms in that sense. Like post-colonialism, for example, every student of English literature will be familiar with the word post-colonialism. Their post is understood in a very different sense. But in post-human, this post actually, what does this post stand for? What is after human? Are we already, kind of crossed the threshold where we are not human anymore and have become something else? And in fact, if we become something else, what is that? So post-humanism as a concept is a very curious concept, and also it's quite confusing as well. So we need to unpack this concept a little bit to understand its ramifications and also the consequences. From a philosophical point of view, it's a rather simpler term, in the sense that like there's a way in which human and technology used to interact in the past. This particular nature of human technology interaction is kind of changing drastically in a way where the distinct identity of technology and the distinct identity of being human gets blurred. There is no distinct human identity that one can talk about, and technology also kind of merges with the human, where a separation between technology and human is increasingly impossible. That is what actually post-human indicate. Otherwise, technology was outside our body. We interact with technology. It's disembodied, and then there is a way in which we connect with technology. There is a way in which we say no to technology. There are many communities and individuals who have said no to technology, and you can still say that. When there was this huge discussion about television and its impact on people, one particular scholar asked the question. I'm wondering whether your television has an on and off switch. So that there is a way in which you can say no to technology. But this posthuman, is a condition where saying no to technology as an individual becomes increasingly difficult. It becomes increasingly, you're enveloped in a kind of technological mesh that you are unable to get out of it, even if you really want to get out of it. So posthuman is a condition. Posthuman, instead of, earlier it's a kind of relationship between technology and the human, but on the other hand, posthuman is a technological condition under which humanity is redefined. This particular definition of humanity is what matters here, and that is what is of some consequence for us to discuss further. And then the second thing is that how is this happening? It's happening in multiple ways. One is that, like probably you may have heard of this concept called transhumanism. Transhumanism is actually a concept that kind of encapsulates this idea that machines can actually be part of the human body, and it becomes really an organ of your body. There are people who now kind of talk about third eye. There are also people who talk about what is it called the third arm. You have two arms, and what is the problem in having one more arm? Synthetic skin. Nothing will happen to your skin. You can have synthetic skin. This is actually this prosthetics coming into the picture of posthumanism is called transhumanism, and this is being widely practiced. But there are certain ethical kind of questions that arise along with these kinds of developments, and that is what posthumanism is mostly concerned about as a philosophical, kind of a system or a philosophical position. Another important thing is the drastic change that happened at the global level in our thinking about technology and human, kind of technology interaction was in the early 1980s. There was a reason why this really happened. I mean, there is a certain kind of political economy that we need to bring into this discussion in order to understand this historical transition. It did not come in a workbook. And sometimes people look at posthumanism, transhumanism and all those, kind of technological developments as pure technological developments. The point that I want to drive home today is that they are not simply technological developments alone. They have a political economy background. They have a kind of political background, much more than kind of a political economy background, which we need to kind of understand in order to have a better grasp of the kind of processes that are happening at the global level. 1970s, in fact, was a very important decade in our human history. Yeah, I mean, in fact, one can take any particular decade and say that was very important in human history. It depends on what you really want to highlight about that decade. And 1970s was an important, kind of decade for me because of a major shift in global governmentality in the 70s. In the decolonization period, particularly following the Second World War, there was a global covenant, there was a global understanding about political governance of citizens across the nation states, and this is what is called the welfare state. This emerged because of several reasons. One is that like Soviet Union was becoming very kind of important globally. There was this condition of what's called Cold War, at that time. And many of the European capitalist countries feared that socialist revolutions will happen in Europe, so you need to contain them. So you need to contain, kind of trade unions. So they made a kind of covenant with the trade unions that we will provide you much more than what is actually provided by capitalism until now. We will not bargain with you on higher wages. We will give you higher wages. We will give you bonus. We will give you, kind of unemployment doors. We will subsidize your, food. We will subsidize your necessities, etc. And this is what is called the welfare state. And this was not there before, kind of Second World War. I mean, the post-Second World War phenomenon that the global capital agreed to become to support a welfare state. And there was its deep repercussions were felt in India also. In the 50s, we had a very unique experience of experiment of welfare state by Jawaharlal Nehru. The unique thing about Indian welfare state experience is that Jawaharlal Nehru integrated this social justice concept of Ambedkar also into its fold. Because Jawaharlal Nehru was basically talking about giving equal opportunity. And then Ambedkar found that this equal opportunity, even if you give it, many sections in our society will not be able to grab the benefit of this equal opportunity that you are offering unless there is also a constitutional bind to include social justice into it. That is how reservations were brought in. Although positive discrimination was part of the welfare state in many other states also, the most systematic incorporation of the concept of positive discrimination into a constitutional framework was done only in India, not anywhere else. And that was actually the contribution of Ambedkar, and Nehru was very broad-minded to include this particular aspect into the constitutional structure, and that Nehru-Ambedkar model welfare state. I mean, that I call this Nehru-Ambedkar model of welfare state, which was unique in the world. But it was not actually an isolated experiment. This was a kind of experiment that many of the European countries also followed at that point of time. So this particular welfare state concept was based on increasing government expenditure. I'll try to explain to you what is the link between kind of these two. This increased government expenditure was an important aspect of this welfare state. When in the 1970s, and that was the period when, for example, Amartya Sen and John Rawls all became interested in distribution and redistribution as a concept, as an ethical concept. And there is this big book by John Rawls called Theory of Justice. And then Amartya Sen also recently written on the idea of justice, and he has been constantly writing about it. Why did this particular concept of justice became so important as part of the 1960s discourse? There were several reasons for that. I'm not going into those details, but then that was the period when many of the global thinkers were collectively and individually thinking about the concept of justice. And but the global capital was thinking about it in a very different way. They found that this welfare state concept is not sustainable. It's actually shrinking the profit rates for us. So there is a need to kind of contain this the growth of this concept called welfare state. And it became so handy for them because in 1973 there was this major incident called oil shock that disrupted the world economic processes in a big way. And then they became more confident. And in fact, Hayek and others who were critical of this concept of justice, kind of brought in a new paradigmatic shift in thinking from the liberalist way of capitalist understanding of global economic processes, which is called neoliberalism. That was not there before. And interestingly, as literature students of history or philosophy, what is interesting for us is to note that the scholar who actually got a hint of it at a very early stage was Michel Foucault. He wrote a book called Birth of Biopolitics. Many people think that it's mostly about biopolitics. Of course it is about biopolitics. But of the 12 chapters, do you know what the 8 chapters contain? The 8 chapters are about neoliberalism. 8 chapters in the 12 chapter book, it was a lecture that he gave in 1978. It's about neoliberalism. He talks about the neoliberalism variant in Germany, United States and many other places, and the whole idea of biopolitics, although it is not brought into the discussion quite often by people, the book is actually about the various dimensions of neoliberalism. So why was Foucault interested in neoliberalism? Foucault, as you know, that was a major thinker who had this idea called, paradigm shift in governance can be called shift in governmentality. So the question whether Foucault was in favor of neoliberalism or not, it's a major debate. I'm not getting into that, but that is important for us in this context. Why is it important for us? I mean, it's not easy to fix whether Foucault was supporting neoliberalism or opposing it. The interesting thing is that he understood that this is going to be a major paradigm in future, and Reaganomics and what is it called, Thatcherism. Thatcherism and Reaganomics had not actually taken prominent position in the world economic processes at that point of time. This was in the 70s when Foucault was writing about it, and interestingly, he actually entered into a conversation with people who were the proponents of neoliberalism, like Hayek and then Gary Becker, who eventually got Nobel Prize in Economics for his neoliberal contribution. He introduced Gary Becker, and this is not known actually. I mean, Foucault goes and introduced Gary Becker and has a dialogue with Gary Becker, who is actually the most important proponent of neoliberalism from the United States. And then and many other kind of neoliberal philosophers, and he understood that from my point of view, Foucault was really not talking about whether neoliberalism is good or bad. I mean, he was actually in a way supporting neoliberalism because he hated the Soviet state apparatus. It's very true that he hated the Soviet state apparatus, and he had a kind of disinclination to support statist interventions. So it may be true in a certain sense that Foucault was trying to say that neoliberalism is better than other kind of protectionist positions that global capital takes up. But for me, that's not the point. The point is that Foucault understood that there is going to be a change in what, in his parlance, we can call change in governmentality. That is how Foucault understands a transition. How does Foucault understand the transition? I mean, just like Marx would understand a transition in terms of transition from one mode of production to another, Foucault basically understands two kinds of transition. Transition from one episteme to the other, and then with that also comes a change in governmentality. And governmentality, some people misunderstand governmentality, it's a neologism, but they think that it is government plus mentality. No, it is not government plus mentality. It is actually governance plus rationality. That is the rationality of governance. That is actually what the word implies. Governmentality implies rationality of governance. So he is understanding this as, for me, I mean, he doesn't say that it is governmentality, shift in governmentality. But when I read Birth of Biopolitics, I understand that he was hinting at the transition from a particular kind of governmentality which is rooted in protectionism to a neoliberal paradigm, and that is why he was interested in it. I mean, none of the Marxist scholars, none of the prominent postmodernist scholars at that time did not understand this huge thing coming. Looming over our horizon. Only Foucault had the insight to, kind of understand this and engage with it deeply. I mean, it's not just a peripheral mentioning of neoliberalism, or there are scholars who write about, neoliberalism. He wrote a whole book, as I said, about neoliberalism, and engaged in deeper conversations with such philosophers like right-wing philosophers, like Hayek and Gary Becker and many others. I'm not able to kind of remember all the names at the moment. But then later, within a few years, neoliberalism becomes the official ideology of global capitalism, and it is manifested in Thatcherism and Reaganomics. And as a consequence of that, and we may not know, I mean, like the way in which capitalism understands the world, the way in which capitalism reshapes the world, sometimes the unique, nuanced, subtle aspects of this drastic change misses our everyday experience. I mean, immediate, kind of experience. When this particular thing happened, that the shift from protectionist, capitalist, a global regime to a kind of neoliberal regime, that was when they came up with a new concept of World Trade Organization. They asked for changes in tariff and trade. At that time there was a huge, kind of opposition against the changes that were brought about at the WTO. We know that Duncan draft, and I think Prakash Marsh and Manu remember that in Kerala also we had this huge debate on Duncan draft. Shanmugas will also, I think, remember, there was this huge debate on Duncan draft and what it poses for our future, etc. But that was actually one aspect of it, by which they wanted to change the patent laws. The way in which the technology is understood in an economic way, because many of the patent laws that existed in countries like India were not going to be favorable if the world was going to be neoliberal. See, the capitalism understands only economics as a global process. It is not a national process for capitalism. Although nation state is important for capital at different stages, at varying degrees of significance, but what they really want to understand is that they want us to understand is that this is a global process. So what do? They want every nation state to fall in line and change the existing laws, constitutional provisions, and move according to the dictates of global capital. And that was why WTO was reconstituted. And then many of these particular laws and regulations that existed at that time completely got changed without any brick of conscience. They changed even the minutest law that was against neoliberalism across the world. And there are very interesting stories, like how African countries, for example, had to cope up with this kind of change at that time. I'm not going into those details now, but then the kind of coercion that European Union, Japan, and the United States could use for making countries to fall in line with this change. And why did they do that at that point of time? And that is what is important for us. The reason why, and you can see that most of the changes in digital technologies and genetic technologies came about after this particular development. Not in the 60s and 70s. In the 60s and 70s, there were major developments in genetic technology and digital technology. But then, even IBM chief was not thinking about a future where people will have laptops, forget about Android phones. They thought that a personal laptop is useless and nobody is going to use it. I mean, IBM chairman at that point, in the 70s, they were saying. But in the 80s, everything changed. The two things happened. One is that genetic technologies and digital technologies underwent a kind of rupture, in terms of the advances in those fields. And secondly, they converged. Genetic technology and digital technologies converged, and this convergence had a huge impact. And the movement of the Posthuman, in fact, emerged at this particular moment of the convergence of digital technologies and genetic technologies. Because on the one hand, there is a technology that was kind of fabulously changing the course of future of humans in one way, and there was this genetic technology that was going to drastically change the structure of or the consciousness of what we call a human. So this is particularly the moment of the posthuman. Although one can trace back the use of the word posthuman to several decades back, we can think about people who have written about this posthumanism in the past, etc., etc. But for me, there is a political economy movement and a technological movement that defined the birth of the posthuman, and that is the 1980s as a decade. And from then onwards, the technological development across the world actually follows a kind of its movement is like the movement of a constellation. You know the movement of a constellation. I mean, towards some galaxy moving in one direction, all the stars will go along the same direction. I mean, I'm not very good in science. If there is somebody who knows science, please correct me. But this is the technology actually moves like this. For example, the first wave of mechanical energy-based technology. Then suddenly somebody invents the steam engine, and then immediately people understand that this can be used in multiple devices, and you can develop multiple devices. And then comes the electrical, it's just a casual invention, and then suddenly electricity becomes so omnipresent, and then every other technology emerging will be actually using this particular theoretical idea of electricity. And then electronic comes. Same thing happens. I mean, every new technology that will be trying to incorporate this the idea of the electronics into it. And once the digital emerges, suddenly digital becomes the in thing. And then every single technology that can be thought about will have something or the other to do with digital technology. And it was at the same time that the genetic technology also became globally very prominent. You know about cloning and ethical issues associated with stem cell research. These were not before. I mean, that is precisely why Habermas wrote a very interesting book on genetic technology, and the title of the book is actually the future of human nature. I mean, I'm wondering, because he wrote it in the 1990s when these developments were at the early stages of its growth. The title of the book is Future of Human Nature. And there is a huge controversy about whether human nature is there or not, whether it's a social product or it is inherently a nature that is inherently human, etc., etc. There's a whole set of debate. But what he was trying to say is now becoming increasingly important, because he was trying to say that genetic engineering is going to cause deep ripples, in and around kind of nation state, because the ethical ideas that religions and nation states upholds will now be thoroughly challenged from multiple perspectives. So and human nature, and there is a way in which one can actually interfere with human nature, and that is precisely again an important aspect of posthuman that we need to reckon with. What is happening, for example, genome editing. Genome editing is actually is full of interesting consequences for future. I mean, it is actually part of the neo-eugenics. I'm sure that you are all familiar with the word eugenics, where humans can intervene in a way that reproduction of certain kind of individuals can actually be controlled, forced sterilization, allowing certain racial groups to excommunicating certain social groups, discriminating against some social groups, eliminating certain social groups, etc. Eugenics. In Nazi, kind of Germany, this was widely practiced. New eugenics is not that kind of a state-led intervention in that sense. But this is an individual choice. But individual choice is a misnomer. Individual choice is a capitalist fraud. Individual choice, we can say that it exists, but it's basically the capitalist fraud to, kind of hoodwink us. Here, the choice is that parents can actually decide whether they can allow the medical technology to make changes in the genes. If you make such changes in the genes, it is going to have impact for future generations. I mean, and the health impacts of that is yet to be discovered. So there are major ethical questions that revolve around this particular kind of development, and digital technologies also. So what has happened is that with the use of both genetic technologies and digital technologies, global capitalism's major interest was actually pursuit of profit, as we all know. But then nation states, who were supposedly weakened by the globalization process, became an active player in the politics. There was a re-alliance of nation states and global capital that happened in the 1990s and also in the early decade of the millennium, where the whole thing changed. I mean, like we were all saying that, okay, nation states have become weakened, they have become less important. Global capital has in fact blurred the boundaries of nation states. The parliaments do not have any power, etc., which is not true. Nobody is going to refute completely this argument. But at the same time, capital does not work in a compartmentalized binary way. I mean, okay, either state nor something else. That's not the way in which they work. They work in a way that how, for example, nation states can be used, and the nation states also understand that there is a way in which it can use the frontier interests of capital to its own benefit. So what has now happened is this: the kind of technologies that emerged during the first decade of the new millennium, for example, following up on the developments in the 1990s. I mean, you are all postgraduate students. I think you must be, kind of in your early 20s, because you are postgraduate students. We are actually talking about a world that got drastically changed around the time when we were born. These things did not exist before that. None of the things that I mentioned today existed before you were born. It was born along with you during the same time. That's called your digital natives. You are the digital natives, and then this is a world that was co-created with you 20 years ago. When you talk about technology, normally you talk about a long kind of period in history. But this particular set of technology that we are talking about had its origin in the late 1990s and afterwards. And it had immense consequences. I mean, these surveillance technologies, for example, surveillance was always there. Surveillance was always there. Recently, I visited this fort in Lucknow. I forgot the name of the fort. Like it's a Shia, kind of construction. There is a particular pond or well, and if the king looks at the pond, he can see the visitors coming at the gate. So there is a way in which some glasses are fixed and things like that. I mean, these are very vague, and then I actually looked at it. I didn't find anything. I mean, maybe my mistake, but that's a different thing. But the story is that it was for surveillance. I mean, so surveillance is not a new thing. I mean, surveillance existed all along in human history. And before digital technologies, also there was surveillance. I mean, Foucault wrote a lot about panopticon and various other kind of technologies of surveillance. But this is not that kind of a technology. I mean, that is where I called, not the big brother, but it is the big other. The big other can be anyone. I mean, the kind of technology that you use probably will have an impact on, kind of me, which is actually completely unknown to me at that point of time. Like Google Glass, we wear the Google Glass and walk to the street. It captures the conversations of other people. And you use Facebook, you use many other kind of platforms. Many of the things that we now do are actually provided to us in the last 2 decades. The technology that we are now using, most of it, are provided to us, brought to us in the last 2 decades, including the smartphone, including kind of many other technologies that we are actually engaging with on an everyday basis. But the point is this: these kinds of surveillance technologies are not actually working within EFLU. They are deeply, closely connected with the systemic changes within the global capitalist model. And how does this happen is what is important for us. And that is precisely where I am trying to tell you that there is a deep interconnection between the way in which the nation state and global capital interact. One of the interesting kind of facets of this development is to see the important tools that the state has laid its hands on. Recently, you heard in the newspaper about this message for iPhone users. That Apple sent, and all the opposition leaders in India got that that message that their phone may be under surveillance by state attackers, right? Okay, actually, I was stunned when I had read the news, because before this important opposition leaders in India got it, 1 month before that I got that message. I have a poor writer who contributes a column, occasionally writes in Malayalam and English. 1 month before the opposition leaders in India got this alert from Apple phone, I got that alert that you are under, kind of surveillance by, probably under surveillance by state attackers. So, then I googled and found out state attackers are and state hackers are and things like that. That is actually a very recent development. But I think you have heard about Pegasus. Pegasus is a kind of technology developed by Israel, and now we are witnessing a inhuman war between kind of Palestine and Israel. Most people try to kind of phrase it in such a way that there was this attack by Hamas in Israel, soil, and that caused a new war and things like that. It's completely ahistorical to talk about it. You should know the history of Palestine and Israel for the last 40 years to understand whether Hamas was making a kind of violation of borders, or whether this was actually retaliation for the several other things that have been constantly happening in Gaza and West Bank for several decades. All human rights in those places have been curtailed by Israel, and Israel have been, kind of taking away land from Palestine. I'm not going into the details of all that, but you must understand what does Israel mean in its whole technological regime. Israel is actually a hub of producing spinal technologies across the world, and they were able to mobilize and remobilize opinion in favor of Israel through the use of through selling these kinds of Posthuman artificial intelligence directed technologies, which inflicted upon the human rights of individuals and collectives in and across the world. I will give you one simple example. In early 2012 or 14, I don't exactly remember the year. There was a voting in United Nations. So in that particular after the voting, I was thoroughly surprised. So I wrote a Facebook note saying that why Panama and Mexico voted against Israel, voted in favor of Israel and against Palestine. And this has not happened in the hundreds of resolutions that UN passed. These countries have actually supported Palestine, and there was nothing in the world that happened to change the approach of two Latin American countries on the Israel-Palestine conflict. So I wrote in my Facebook that this is something that what you call imponderable, something that you cannot explain. This is one of the imponderables. I am not able to explain. And then in 2017, for example, India suddenly kind of was in favor of Israel. I'm shocked. And I said another imponderable. Of course, BJP has a soft corner for Zionists and things like that. We know that. But then beyond that, as a nation state, it is not possible to suddenly change your alliance in the United Nations and vote for another. You cannot actually hope for a different pattern immediately. It's not really possible, but it happened. And then in 2020 or 2021, New York Times comes up with this big report about the technology called Pegasus. And in 2011-2012, these two countries which actually voted against Palestine and at that time purchased Pegasus from Israel. That Pegasus is a technology that is used to kind of spy upon people. They said that this is to spy upon the drug mafia, but then the New York Times report very clearly revealed that for the last 10 years, Panama and Mexico and other Latin American countries which purchased Pegasus from Israel have been using it to curtail the human rights of groups by spying on them, collecting intelligence about them, arresting major human rights activists and incarcerating them. So and then in 2017, what happens? In New York Times report, I'm not saying it. Don't think that I said that India got Pegasus. New York Times report said that in 2017 India got Pegasus, and then it infiltrated smartphones of many Indian human rights activists. It's New York Times report. It's not that I'm saying it. To be safe. So and in 2017 you see that India is changing its voting pattern in Israel-Palestine issue in United Nations. So what is Israel doing? I mean, Israel is doing precisely this. It is actually making a driven technologies, which actually help global surveillance of individuals and groups and communities, and nation states are buying it up. And this is not an isolated incident. I will tell you the example of another such technology which infiltrates, into the domain of human rights of individuals, which is called ANO. And this is a fascinating story, actually. I mean, like this is like a science fiction or a crime thriller kind of a thing. There's a new smartphone that appears in what's called the Scandinavian countries, particularly Denmark or Netherlands. I don't exactly remember where it was. I think it was in Netherlands. Called ANO, which is a very curious kind of a smartphone. If you send a message, if the other person reads it, suddenly it disappears. Very safe. I mean, it's not never stored anywhere, and this technology is available. And then mafia, the word is spread among mafia leaders that it is drug mafia leaders that it is dealers that it is an interesting technology that they can use. So common people also buy it, but most interestingly, the mafia dealers also buy it. So they began kind of sending messages through this ANO. So that's actually the first part of the story. After 9 months, 800 mafia leaders are arrested along with many other people. So, what the users, consumers of this, because this was actually given in the market. This was not anything, that in any dubious background to it. It was available in the market and people bought it. But the only thing is that this was actually programmed in such a way that any message that is sent through this particular phone, it disappears, but it will reach the police headquarters. This phone was actually designed by the police. This phone was actually designed by the police and brought it to the market. You buy some technology thinking that it's a new kind of technology available in the market. You don't know whether it is actually encrypted with certain kind of facilities that you are unaware of, that nobody is aware of. That's the thing. That nobody is aware of. And you can say that okay, this is being used to kind of capture criminals. But that's only one aspect of it. But then you are universalizing its use, by which you are universalizing the theft of privacy of individuals. Democratically, you are not supposed to do it. You are not supposed to do it. But these kinds of technologies are pervading, and nation states are increasingly depending on these kinds of technologies, production and distribution of these technologies, so that they can spy upon citizens. This is actually gross violation of any norm of individual privacy and human rights. This is actually possible only in this kind of a post-human phase where technology becomes subservient to the interest of global capitalism on the one hand and nation states on the other as surveillance technologies. And not only the states have to be blamed. And what is the private capitalists doing? The same kind of surveillance has become a kind of industry. Surveillance is actually an industry. I mean, it is not just something else. I mean, what is surveillance capitalism? Surveillance capitalism is an economic process which involves collection, analysis and commodification of data. That is surveillance capitalism. I mean, it's actually it's creating value out of nowhere. It is creating value out of the kind of social media searches that you make. The algorithms are working to collect every single click that you make in your smartphone and in the computer and analyze that. They collect that data, analyze that data, and then commodifies that data. They don't produce anything. I mean, like in the classical capitalism, you have to produce something in order to make profit. I mean, you have the surplus value to enhance your profit. But under the new surveillance capitalism, this is not the norm. The norm is that somebody else privately doing something at their home becomes value for global capitalism, and this is a very, very new scientific development which has no predecessor, no past example at all. This is an entirely new kind of unprecedented kind of a scenario where global value creation by capitalism is actually made possible without producing anything materially anywhere in any factory or anywhere for that matter. Completely depending on our own private responses. collecting the data and commodifying it and selling it. I mean, like people normally say, if something is free, then you are the product. I mean, that's what they say. But beyond that, I mean, that's not the story. I mean, it's not that you are the product. You are actually unpaid labor of global capitalism. When you upload a status in the Facebook, when you upload a photo in the Facebook, you are actually increasing the value of Facebook in the global stock market. So they use your own, and making this inevitable for everyday use. I mean, you cannot think of a life without social media. This inevitability was created in the last 2 decades. Global capital created this inevitability for you in the last 2 decades, not before that. The affordances, some of the things that you do because the affordances are there for you to do it in the technology platforms. Otherwise, you will not do it. I always tell, kind of my students, and also when I talk about these issues, I say that, like that you ate 4 idlis with nicely made chutney in the morning is not a matter of importance for anybody else. And in the past, you will never actually tell us anyone that, I ate 4 idlis in the morning and the chutney was very tasty. But then, now you will take a photograph of these 4 idlis and chutney and put it in Facebook and say this. So what has happened? I mean, this is precisely where Habermas insight is becoming important. The kind of post-human technologies infiltrate our lives, not by direct coercion by global capital, but incrementally changing our behavioral patterns. So the way in which it intervenes is not in your kind of taste and habits, or it is not supporting your taste and habits. You have something to say when it gives you a platform. No, it actually eventually makes you actually say what it wants. A very simple example I will tell you. Most of you watch YouTube. So today morning, if you watch a Hindi song, afternoon you again open YouTube, there will be 3 more Hindi songs. You think that I watched one Hindi song in the morning, so and my classic example is this. There were 1 Hindi song and 1 sex speech. You listen to one person listen to the Hindi song and the other person listens to sex speech. So in the evening, what you can see is that there will be 1 speech by Sisek and 1 speech by Agamben there in your YouTube, and 3 more Hindi songs. Okay. So this time, like you listen to 3 Hindi songs, and the other person listens a bit of Agamben and then listens to a Hindi song. After 2-3 days, the more and more of the Hindi song, and then you become addicted to listening to Hindi songs. You think that YouTube actually supports your taste and habit, but you never realize that indirectly it influenced your taste. Now I'm giving a very crass example. I'm not saying that this exactly it happened, but like this crass example will tell you. I mean, you are all familiar with this. You listen to a kind of skit in YouTube, and then suppose an algorithm is actually a very strange animal. Nobody knows, including its makers, know how it works. Suppose the particular skit was about kind of a husband and a wife, or 2 lovers. It even notes that particular aspect of this skit, and then more and more of that will be given to you. So you will see more of kind of family jokes in skits, and the kind of way in which the algorithms try to gather your initial behavior and then use your initial behavior to reinforce your behavioral pattern. And that is how the nation states and also capitalism works. So in a way that this is a world, there is a story about brain in the bat. And now we are actually coming to a technological similarity where we are all going to be brain in the bat. The story is this. Brain in the bat story is that, some experiment conducted by a doctor. There was a patient. The patient removed the brain of this particular, the doctor removed the brain of this patient and then connected it to a computer. So the brain is now working on the basis of simulations given by the computer. It's a hypothetical philosophical, kind of puzzle. So, when the computer says that you are seeing a tree, you see a tree, because it is the simulated, kind of image that is given to you. But the philosophical question is not that. The philosophical question is that how will Rasina know that she is not a brain in the vat? That is the question. How do you know that you are not a brain in the vat? Actually, if you say that I am not a brain in the vat, I can say that that is what the computer tells you. So the philosophical question is that what humans cannot really, this is actually the agnostic, kind of a thing. You really don't understand the extent of reality. That's actually the thing. But now we are coming to an empirical possibility where, your impulses are being directed in such a way, influenced in such a way that you don't know where that those impulses come from. You really do not know where that impulses come from, and that is precisely where the whole concept of digital and genetic convergence of the digital and the genetic technology become increasingly posing ethical concerns, questions for humanity. And it is this precise context in which where we are all now vulnerable to state espionage by kind of other kinds of companies, and then about the data that the governments collect. The biometric data that the government collects. What is the security for such safety and security for such data? John Biden is saying that artificial intelligence, as I told you in the beginning, there has to be some kind of regulation. But this regulation is not really going to affect the way in which private companies are going to use the technology against individual citizens. This is only a kind of cover-up. For example, even before this, when Google appeared, there were several human rights violations that the company has made. And even now, with artificial intelligence, OpenAI, there are several, kind of breaches of human rights and also privacy rights caused by OpenAI, and then what's called there's this company called Everbomb, I think. That there's this smartphone app called Ever. This smartphone app Ever actually uses our facial recognition without telling us. It actually takes and uses according to its own needs. And there was this, kind of concern about these kinds of technologies, facial recognition technologies. In UK, sometime back, one of the ministers or Secretary IT was saying that we now have the technology to identify every human being by their face. Once you get out of the house, there are the CCTV cameras, and then you are using credit card or any other electronic card that you are using. So you move, and then you use this electronic card in a particular mall. Then your movement from house to the mall and from mall to the railway station or railway station to bus stand or whatever can be traced. Who did this particular transport and purchase can be known. He's saying that in UK we have democracy, the state is not able to use this, but if you really want to use this technology can be used. He was openly saying. What does it mean? This means that all kinds of restrictions that earlier existed in terms of interfering with the privacy of individuals, citizens, is now floated. There is no guarantee that there can be any concept of privacy any longer, that you cannot uphold to a principle of privacy any longer. And how do they do it? And that is precisely the point. It is not that all kinds of privacy is being taken away, but the way in which capitalism and nation state will actually deploy these technologies is by changing your own concept of privacy. So in an earlier generation, you may not be kind of willing to put up a photo in Facebook where you kiss your spouse or your lover. But now you may be doing it. You are doing it because of two reasons. One is that inhibitions about doing it is slowly being I'm not looking at it from a moralistic point of view. I'm saying that this is the affordance of the technology that helps you and molds your view on your morality and your privacy. It's not the other way around. I mean, this kind of distinct ethical integrity that one could actually boast of in the past no longer exists. I mean, our integrity is being questioned by the kind of affordances that the technology provides. We really do not know who we are and what we are doing and how these technologies are changing us and our own behavior. So there is a deep intervention at the level of changing the way in which humans think about these kind of concepts like human rights and privacy. So the way in which you yourself change your idea of human rights you tend to say that, okay, these kinds of things the nation state can take away from you. You are a willing accomplice to the state endeavor of taking away your human rights. Because your philosophy aligned with the philosophy of the nation state. Your ideology gets to align with the ideology of the nation state and surveillance capitalism. And this is not your making. You think that you are an autonomous individual, you have made this conscious decision, this is my politics. Not really so. This politics has been given to you, this ideology has been given to you over the last 2 decades through these technologies that were deployed by global capitalism and nation state, which is something that we have completely kind of ignored in our analysis. So this is precisely the question that we need to take up. I mean, how is human rights being increasingly affected in the global arena and also within nation state with the introduction of surveillance technology? How is surveillance capitalism itself becoming a kind of global technological regime that dictates the behavior of even nation states? That is what is happening. There is this interesting book by Susanna Zuboff, Surveillance Capitalism. It's a fabulous book, a fascinating book, where she actually says that earlier totalitarianism in a certain sense was much better than the kind of surveillance capitalist ideology that is emerging across the globe now. Even liberal thinkers, liberal humanist thinkers are now becoming aware that even a Soviet model Big Brother totalitarian state was perhaps much better than the way in which we are subjugated by surveillance capitalism. And it becomes all pervading. I mean, you don't have a defense against it. At least in totalitarianism as an ideology, you have a defense against it. Here, you already defeated in this. You are already defeated because you are now a willing accomplice to the reinforcing the same kind of technological system that is actually kind of spying on you. This is precisely the point. I mean, so global capitalism, in a way, you can say that okay, it's creating value. There is this fascinating book by what's the name? Mospidi. She wrote this book called Value of Everything. It's a fabulous book because I will mention 2 people who were completely kind of endorsing the book politically. One is Pope Francis. Pope Francis said that this book is very interesting, and then we think that okay, this is religious content. And no, it is about how value is created at the global level by these companies without even spending a single penny, and also without employing any single person. How value becomes a commodity. And the second person who thought that this book is very important is J.D. Ghosh, who is a Marxist economist from India. J.D. Ghosh has written a review about this book, Value of Everything. The thing is that this is precisely what is happening. What is happening is that capitalism has taken over the global economic processes in such a way that it can create value on without actually giving anything in return. Earlier, you give your labor, you get some return for that wages. You can say that the wages was not enough, but you don't complain to Facebook that okay, I put up this status, you got some value, give me that, give my wages. You can say that you are becoming part of that set of processes which incorporates you without your concern. I mean, many of the as students of literature, you know that there were many recent and also like from 1960s onwards, science fiction novels and films. This particular thing, what's called androids. Do the androids dream of electric sheep? Have you heard of this novel? I mean, some of you might have heard of this novel. And this became the foundation for the material for 2 films, Blade Runner 1 and Blade Runner 2. In this particular novel, this is actually about kind of posthuman cyborgs, this quasi-human beings, and also completely non-human beings becoming global actors. And there is this film called this novel called Neuromancer by William Gibson, which I think some of you might have heard of it. Where again, and that is actually very fascinating. I mean, there is this person who made some theft in the company. So the company, using some technology, completely made him immovable. I mean, his spinal cord was destroyed by the company so that he can't move. And then somebody comes, army tape or something, like some person comes and tells him that if you do the kind of, he was actually a kind of hacker. I mean, in 1984 when Neuromancer was written, the word Posthuman and the cyborg and all those things were not really catching public imagination, but he uses those words, and also he uses the word matrix, which became actually the name of the trilogy called the Matrix series, where some idea from the novel is also being used. In Neuromancer, then what he says is that, and this is precisely the moment in which a novel tries to capture this emerging scenario of the convergence of the genetic technology and the digital technology. So what Armitage does is that I will help you recover from this fatal damage that is done to your spinal cord. But the only thing is that if you do not do what I am asking you to do, I can destroy you, because along with this rectifying the problem with your spinal cord, I am also putting sacks of poison in your vessels. And if you really do not do what I ask you, these sacks will burst and you will die, or you will go back to the earlier disability phase. The novel anticipates a point where the nation states and also somebody else can actually do this to you, and that point is abolished. And there is this kind of novel called Accelerator, the speeding up. There there are the coexistence of digital individuals, biological individuals, and then cyborgs. And we are actually coming into a kind of stage where human consciousness is being controlled and dominated by forces that is outside your self. Your identity is being increasingly compromised in that sense. Your identity is being increasingly compromised. And like as I pointed out earlier, these developments happened in the last 2 decades with immense consequences for human rights across the world, not only in India, but everywhere else. But the way in which it is understood is very different. I mean, because liberal humanism is an ideology that tries to understand these kinds of developments. But it understands these things in specific, regional, situational context. I mean, for example, this novel called Crash, for example, it understands that these kinds of developments, cyborgs and kind of Posthuman human rights questions are an ethical question in the citadels of capitalism. Whereas when it comes to the global south, it is always against as a fight against multinational corporations who try to manipulate the global south, individuals and communities and things like that. This is actually the problem with liberal humanism. It doesn't have a kind of global imperative to discuss the emerging kind of question, but it kind of dispatches this question in bits and pieces into different parts of the continent, and then makes its own permutations and combinations. There is also this another novel called Diamond Age. I think it is written by Neil Stephenson. I mean, you can check out Google later on these novels. And then there is this novel called The Circle by Dave Eggers. Oh, it's a fascinating novel, and that is actually the moment that that define our posthuman age is being ably captured with all nuances in this particular novel called The Circle. The word circle is actually the name of a company like Facebook or Google. It's a name. I mean, like Google or what's it called, Meta. Now Facebook is called Meta, I think. And then Google also has another name. I think, what is it? Some other name. They have given recently. I just can't remember it immediately. So what is actually Google trying to do? Google, when it established its, introduced its search engine, there is something that one of the Google founders said. The Google founders said that we cannot be God, but we can be like God. We can see everything. That is what, in religions, God sees everything. Omnipresent, omnipotent, kind of thing. These are the definitions of it. Algorithm is actually, in that sense, they said that we want to be like gods. And then every single tech company in the world now wants to be like God by creating new kinds of images, interfering in the way in which human body is constituted, selling immortality directly. I mean, it's a dream about immortality that humans always, kind of carry in their heart. That dream of immortality, that idea of immortality is commodified through the use of new technologies by these tech companies. And this company Circle in this novel is precisely doing that. They are actually imagining a kind of society where everything is actually online. Everything is online and everybody is incessantly online. Like when we are kind of talking, we are sleeping, we are going to washroom, wherever you go, you are actually online, and you are transparent to everybody else. Because in a world where your privacy concerns are shrinking, or your privacy concerns are being influenced by them, you will reach a kind of singularity, as I told you earlier, where you are no longer concerned about privacy at all. And that is why in the novel, the company is, one of the motto of the company is that privacy is theft. If you are keeping something secret, then you are actually stealing an information that ought to be available to another person. It is theft. And sharing is caring, they say. Sharing is caring in the sense that everything has to be shared. That is why you are constantly under the surveillance of the video camera under circle. And they say that this reduces corruption. No political party can now, leader can actually take corruption because 24 hours he is under the gaze of other people. So every single person is under the gaze of the other person. And then we think of a global situation where everybody can see everybody else. What they are doing. I mean, there is no need of any particular concept of privacy there. So these are science fiction. We can say that this is science fiction, but at the same time, one interesting point that struck me was that in the same year, 2013, when this novel was published, the two people from Google also wrote a book about future of digital world. The circle, independently the novel circle talks about one single window for all your interactions. Suppose you want to, have your Gmail, your Facebook, your Twitter, your online banking, your other kinds of exchanges, only one single password and one single user name. That is what for everybody in the world. And circle monopolizes that. The thing is that if you are not into the circle, without a username and a password, you don't exist in this world. You are that where what's called animal of animal. You are a non-citizen of the nation state or the global nation state. You are outside of it. Everybody has to have a username and password, and then everybody has to have a real username and password. You cannot have fake IDs. You know why Facebook is so afraid of fake IDs? Because it cannot be profiled. Like a fake ID, as a fake ID, you go and do all kinds of things in the Facebook. That's of no use to them, because there is nothing that can be sold to a fake ID. It's a niche for them to advertise on your fake ID platform, because they don't know whether it is a real person or not. So the thing is that avoiding fake ID looks like a very kind of ethical thing, and then you say that okay, fake ID is kind of harass, so fake ID should be eliminated, etc. There is an ethical dimension to it, a political dimension to it. But don't think that global capitalism also has the same concern as you when we think about fake ID. They have a very different concern. They have a very different concern. So in this novel, it says about this one window, and then in this book by Google, founders, they say that our aim is to have a single username and password for everybody in the world. In the same year, 2013, independently of the book and the novel came out in the same year. I mean, I don't think they read that when they wrote it. So what happens is that the concepts that we derive from science fiction are no longer fictional. As Donna Haraway very correctly said long ago in 80s, she said that the boundary between social, reality and science fiction, she did not say it is blurred. She said it is an optical illusion. The distinction between social reality and science fiction is an optical illusion. That is what she said. I mean, it's not that it is getting blurred, which is a very moderate academic way of saying it. So rejecting this a more moderate academic way of talking about the relationship between science fiction and social reality, she said that this is an optical illusion, that this is just just a false kind of belief that science fiction is kind of about the future. Science fiction is no longer about future because the reality is actually more fictional than science fiction now. And another important aspect of this development is that, as I told you, of course, nation state is in a kind of coalition with global capitalism to deploy these technologies around the world. But more than that, the way in which we understand consciousness, the way in which, for example, our own existential acts were represented by ourselves is also getting drastically changed. And this is actually I think this is the year of 80th year of being and nothingness by Sam. We were, as young students, we were all trying to read Being and Nothing. It's a very complex text. I think Manoj, you have also read Being and Nothingness when you were in college. Like when I was doing my MA, I tried to read the Being and Nothingness, read many pages, again and again and many pages. Some of the things I understood, some of the things I didn't understand. But eventually, when I became a scholar, a teacher, went back to it, and then with the help of many other secondary materials, also tried to understand what he was trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that the kind of existential questions that existentialism posited in the 1960s is now kind of re-emerging for us. It's now re-emerging. We have not discarded, in the age of postmodernism, we discarded existentialism completely. But there is actually a moment of realization now, that the existential questions are becoming broader because the idea of consciousness is being increasingly contested. Whether you have one or not, is being increasingly contested. And then that has tremendous impact on the way in which you understand yourself. So what I've been trying to, to recapitulate what I've tried to, drive home today, the kind of technological changes that happened and began to happen in the 1980s, formidably supported by global capital and nation states, and also prominently, scaffolded by the economic ideas of neoliberalism, has reached a new stage where going back is not really possible. This has become a major concern not only for political parties or political thinkers or philosophers, but even at the what you call the people at the helm of the new technological regime. They themselves are understanding this as irreversible. AI is irreversible. You cannot actually go back. There are no ethical imperative. The world has actually lost its ethical imperative. Ethical imperative means there's a common standard that you can apply as an ethos, as a norm for everything. Of course, it's an abstract idea. Kant, when he said this, this imperative is important. That is upon which you judge other people. Something that you do, other people can also do. That is the imperative. But when we always used to question this ethical imperative, why do we do it? Kind of a thing. But then, the complete loss of this ethical imperative at the global level with the advent of these new technologies is an alarming, kind of signal to humanity as a whole and our own history in that particular sense. So the direction that the future trajectories of human civilization itself is coming under scanning with these types of development. So that is precisely, so it's not just a question of human rights in the conventional sense. Human rights in the conventional sense, we know, we want basic rights of, right to food, right to education, right to learning, right to good living, etc., etc. This is not only about that. Those things are important. But then, the posthuman age is bringing up an entirely different scenario for us to negotiate. An entirely different, kind of complex situation for us to understand. And this is where we stand now. And I suppose there should be more discussions, more debates on this particular issue, so that we get a better grasp of the kind of developments within which we are enveloped in the contemporary world. And I congratulate the department again for organizing events in memory of your past professors, and using this as an opportunity to reflect upon issues of contemporary significance. And I'm much honored that I am kind of allowed to be part of this exercise. And thank you profusely for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.